All right. Peace and blessings, everybody. Welcome to Real Talk Uncensored. I am your host, Sister Zakia Sankara Jabbar. And tonight, I got my brother Jeff Kennedy with me. And mute yourself, Jeff.
Okay, I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah,
hear me? Okay.
can you mute yourself? I hear an
Oh,
echo.
you. It's not.
No, I'm asking you to mute yourself.
I did.
Can you still hear the echo?
I don't hear echo.
Okay. Anyway, cool. Um, that was weird. I can hear it. That's so weird. Well, when I'm talking, you mute. Is that okay? Like just mute yours while I'm talking.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can still hear you, but I want you to mute yourself.
I don't think it's any echo. I don't hear anything.
What I'm asking you to do is when I'm talking, you just mute.
Okay. All right. So when you're talking, I'm a mute. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. We finally got that taken care of. Anyway, welcome to tonight's show. I'm excited to welcome Brother Jeff. We are here. We're getting ready to talk about eugenics. It's something that, has been going on for a very long time in this country. And I want to allow the brother to really explain it. He is definitely one of the premier I would say, thinkers on this issue. And he is constantly tagging me on social media, on Facebook every day about here's this new thing. Look at what's happening, Sister Zakia, all of that. Anyway, welcome, Brother Jeff. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's just get right into it.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jeff Canady, and I come to you in the complete spirit of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who I'm always thankful for what He is able to bring me through. I think the issue of eugenics has been one that has not, especially for the African American community, been highlighted, especially in academia. I know the first time I heard the word, I was 9 years old. And I expressed this to Sakia before. I was watching Dr. Frances Quest Welsing, and she was debating William Shockley on the Tony Brown Journal. And I know everybody's like, why is a 9-year-old watching Tony Brown Journal? But that was my show. And they brought up a concept called eugenics, and they were talking about what dysgenic was. And at that particular time, I became fascinated with this particular topic matter. And during my conversations with Dr. Welsing for years, she'd always said that one day you're going to be teaching the subject, you're going to be interested in the subject. And I was like, no, I'm not getting caught up in eugenics. Well, lo and behold, I was an early childhood educator within the DC public schools, having an absolutely fascinating ride. At one point, the DC City Council had selected me to be on the board that actually ran DC public schools. I've been nominated for the school board. I've been put into a Harvard program. The District of Columbia had paid for me to get 2 master's degrees. So I was being widely known for being an outstanding educator. And they brought in a woman named Michelle Reed. And all of a sudden, all of that turned around. I found myself fired illegally, unable to get the Washington Teachers Union and the American Federation of Teachers to bring my case forward for years. So I had to buckle down, found myself in dire straits many times. And for years, it's almost 9 years before I actually won. It was 7 years before the teachers union even brought my case forward. And they just sat on it. Just the teachers union and the school system.
This is the Washington Teachers Union, right?
Yeah, but they were negotiating with me. The school system was negotiating. They were offering me millions of dollars, basically for my silence. They were offering me millions of dollars. All they knew, and the mayor's office knew all along the way that I had been fired illegally, And ultimately, I won. And as soon as I won, they offered me a million more dollars. And when I wouldn't take it, they fired me again. And it just as illegally as they did the first time. And most people would, have to ask the question, how is it that they can offer you millions of dollars and actually fire you again without no cause whatsoever? When you're dealing in a system of public corruption like we have in Washington, D.C., these things happen on a regular occurrence. So what you saw, and I want to shift that conversation to what we so recently saw on Capitol Hill, where an insurrection basically occurred at the Capitol. And a little bit more about myself. I attended Howard University Divinity Theological School, and I attended Union Theological in New York City, UTS. So from that, I had an opportunity to minister at Capitol Hill, and I had an opportunity to minister specifically. There's a lot of police officers in my Bible study, and what we used to have our Wednesday morning Bible studies on Capitol Hill. And what we witnessed was a basic insurrection, one branch of white supremacy, which is led by Trump. And Trump is, even by his own biographer, Trump is a eugenicist. That is his branch of white supremacy. It's called.
Can you give the audience a definition of eugenics so people will understand what it is as a concept?
As a concept, eugenics comes from the Greek word eu, which means well, and genics, born, well born. And what it is, in 1883, a philosopher, a scientist, a mathematician named Francis Galton, who was in 1883, Galton came up with this concept, and he coined a lot of ideologies that was going on at that particular time into a word called eugenics. They were basically a collection of racist ideas. And what eugenics is basically you want to stop people from procreating. You want them to have, if they have children, you want the children to be well born. And it's one set of society deciding that another set of society should not be able to procreate. And a lot of things are scientific racism. A lot of things are different types of racism, but it's eugenics when you're stopping people from procreating. And so they had different ways they wanted to implement this. Euthanasia was one of them. Sterilization was one of them. Actually, at one point in New York, they created a law where they wanted to sterilize people because they had vision problems. So anybody who wore eyeglasses, or and they wanted to get rid of hereditary blindness. So they not only wanted to sterilize those who had vision problems, they wanted to sterilize the perfectly healthy relatives of those who had vision problems to stop them from having children forever. So that was in about the 1920s. Luckily, that law did not pass. But what did pass in 1927 was the Buck versus Bell decision. And I want everybody to look this up. 1927 Supreme Court decision, Oliver Wendell Holmes, 8-1 decision that basically says that 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. And imbecile was one of the classifications, one of the classifications of people that was eugenic at that time. So you had low-grade moron, you had high-grade moron, you had imbecile, and then you had those basic, and a couple of more. You had those definitions that people were fitting. And this is where we get standardized testing from that still evolves in our schools today. So when you start talking about the issue of standardized testing, and I want everyone to look this up also. I think the scholar Ibram Kendi who wrote the book Stamped from the Beginning. I would advise everyone to read that particular book. Did a lot of work around standardized testing and coming from eugenics. Another book by Stephen Selden called Inheriting Shame talks a lot about eugenics in education, and it gives the history. And what I learned was during the time that I had been illegally fired, I had the opportunity to study at Georgetown Law Library. And I actually brought you there along with other people. And I was just amazed at how many books was in the law library. I mean, whole rows of books on eugenics. So then I found out on the first floor, then I found out later that on main campus at Georgetown University in the bioethics library, there's a whole library basically focused in on books on the subject matter that focus in on eugenics. So when you tell people that, just the understanding that you have libraries of books on white supremacy, white racism, and some people have never heard of this subject matter. But then when you're talking to, it seems to be another group of people, they can tell you exactly what eugenics is from some senator's office. So let me backtrack a little bit. So in 2016, Senator Tilden was elected in North Carolina. One of the first things that Senator Tilden did, Republican from North Carolina, one of the first things he did was introduce a law called the Treatment of Certain Payments, and it was sponsored by Senator Carper in Delaware, from Delaware.
What was it called? The treatment of what?
I want everybody to look it up. The Treatment of Certain Payments. And what this law did was for people who had been sterilized, and there's only 2 states at that time who was trying to give compensation for people who had been sterilized by eugenics. And that was North Carolina and the state of Virginia. Virginia only compensated, I think, maybe less than 25 people, but the state of North Carolina compensated, I think, about 4,000 to 5,000 people who had been sterilized in the 50s and the 60s and the 40s. And these people are still alive. And this was the first round of sterilization. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. In the 70s, there was a whole nother 400,000 people who were sterilized. I think there is a movie about, well, matter of fact, I know for sure, there's a movie called Belly of the Beast that came out recently on PBS. Everyone can check that out. And it was about sterilization in California prisons.
Yeah, that was recent. Yeah, they still sterilize Black women and Hispanic women.
And that was just within the last 2 months. I think you can go out and look at something else that's on PBS. Was a special on the eugenics movement that was done by PBS. It was like a 4-part special. And what you find out is what is at the core of American capitalism is this ideology that was created in the 1920s, the early 20th century, called eugenics. And the reason why they had to create this ideology was because at the beginning of the 20th century, America was a very unequal society. We didn't have some of the things that we have in our labor force now. We didn't have weekends. We didn't have holidays. Women couldn't vote. Blacks weren't seen as being human beings. And so you had this crushing capitalism. And what the richest people at that particular time decided to do was to come up with an ideology to say, no, it's not capitalism that's crushing your society. It's hereditary. It's blood. It's in the blood. So they came up with this ideology called eugenics. And so now people are believing that if your father was a Pullman porter, that you were going to be a Pullman porter. If your father was poor, you were going to be poor. If your father or your mother was alcoholic, then now you were going to be an alcoholic. And everything was in your genes. So they came up with this fraudulent ideology. And yeah, somebody just asked actually about Cold Harbor. And in the beginning of the 19th century, they got money from the Carnegie Foundation and the Harrimans and the Rockefellers and the richest people in the country. And they started Cold Spring Harbor up in New York, the beginning of the 20th century. And why this is important, and I want people to look this up too, and I want everybody to look up what I'm telling you. I think it was less than 3 weeks ago, the Carnegie Foundation finally apologized for supporting eugenics for about the last 100 years. So I want to say that again. As in the last 3 weeks, the Carnegie Foundation just apologized for supporting eugenic ideology in the last 100 years. And I want everyone to look that up, Google, Facebook, whatever kind of search engine you use. And I also want you to know the University of London, where Galton had a professorship, they just apologized for eugenics, I think maybe in the last week. So you have major institutions from Stanford, Harvard, the University of Virginia. You can look all of these universities up and see they will be apologizing for the use of eugenic ideology. And
the problem is they're still using it. It's evolving. I mean, I know you're going to get to that.
Our society is still using it, and it gets down to the micro, to where you're using it in your family. You know, instead of saying that it's capitalism that's crushing a lot of people in society, it's like, no, they're lazy and they're trifling. And I know some people will not be able to accept that everyone in their family is not lazy and trifling. They were educated into ignorance, as Dr. Wilson used to say. Amos Wilson, used to say that all the time. You're being educated into ignorance, and you're only following the pattern that you have been educated into, not understanding that it's something out in your society, something in your economics that's crushing Americans. And it doesn't matter if there's people with melanin or without melanin. All across America, this ideology is being played out in families, in homes, in businesses, in institutions, and it's in everything. So I remember a few years ago, I started working on lead waters just because I wanted to get away from eugenics for a little while. And I discovered that the Flint situation had occurred actually in Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. had an actual bigger problem than Flint. So I did 20 radio shows. And one day, I don't know what possessed me to do it. I just looked up eugenics and lead water. And sure enough, I found the British Eugenics Society, where they were discussing lead water, and come to find out the first pill that was used for abortion was called a diachylon pill. And this was a pill made out of lead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, so, Planned Parenthood finally just also apologized about Margaret Sanger, who was an avowed racist white supremacist, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood and absolutely practiced eugenics, and said, I believe there's a quote by her that says the most loving thing a woman can do is kill her baby. It's crazy. And this is also an organization that is still very much running and alive and well, and they have a lot of Black faces that work at the organization now. But I just, when you said the abortion pill, that triggered my memory that Planned Parenthood also has its roots as well in eugenics and controlling the reproduction, particularly of Black women.
Well, let's think about this. How long did Planned Parenthood say they weren't linked to eugenics? That's another organization that just came out this year, maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
It was about 4 or 5 months ago. Yeah,
right.
Just apologized.
Right. And just apologized for their founder being linked to white supremacy eugenics. And when you start talking about current politicians, even Trump, his biographer.
It's a bipartisan issue. I think we need to tell the audience that this is a very much bipartisan issue. Democrats and Republicans support controlling the reproduction of Black folks.
It's not just bipartisan. It doesn't matter what ideology you are. Capitalist, socialist, communist. in China, the one child China policy is a eugenic policy. So, we're not going to go there tonight, but when we start talking about future technologies and when they start talking about biotechnology and they start talking about transhumanism is the 21st century eugenics. And so they're projecting this out for the next 30, 40 years, and they're putting together, but now we have more dangerous technology that they didn't have at the beginning of the 20th century, where especially through CRISPR-9 and other gene splicing technology,
Gene
and
editing.
right, and gene editing technology that people need to look at from a bioethics standpoint, from an ethical standpoint. And a lot of times people ask me, they say, well, Jeff, where did you learn some of this stuff from? And I said, Georgetown University. I was sitting in class and, and then openly discussing this. I remember at Union Theological Seminary, they actually had a class in seminary in eugenics. I didn't take that particular class, but and I went to study under Cornel West maybe about 5 years ago to understand W. Du Bois and his relationship with eugenics. And about the third or fourth class, I started realizing I knew more about the subject than Dr. West. And there's a sister here in Washington, D.C., who I'm always highly favorable and complimentary of, Dr. Chantella Sherman, who has a book. Matter of fact, I have a book right here. So plug Chantella. I want you to see him out there throwing you a shout out, called In Search of Purity. It actually won a couple awards from the Historical Society, a National Historical Society, for her research in white supremacy eugenics. And it takes a look at the African-American community from 1915 to 1935. And why that was important to me, because I'm in a fraternity called Omega Psi Phi, for all the bros, what's up? Ooh. And happy Founders Day to Delta Sigma Theta too. I see everybody got on the red. And she's not claiming Delta, but happy Founders Day to the women of Delta Sigma Theta. But why that was important to me was, while I was studying, learning about W. Du Bois and eugenics, I learned about Ernest E. Jess and epigenetics. And that was just as critical of a study of eugenics as anything else. So to understand what was the relationship between African Americans and eugenics in the beginning, what does it mean when you're discussing racial uplift? What does that really mean in the Black community? So it's a different historical understanding of what is going on, in the world. And Blacks at that time thought they could use eugenics to show that Blacks were just as superior or equal to whites. So remember that the people who believe in eugenic ideology believe in superiority. They believe that they are superior. And the people who are not eugenic, they call them dysgenic, and they consider them to be inferior. And they are trying to wipe them off of the face of the earth. And you can research this stuff. You can look it up, and what you will find is a whole nother world and a whole different understanding of our politics, of our world politics. Why, what is the connection between, and the biggest thing is it's a roadmap to connections to understanding geopolitical politics. Then you'll start understanding why Trump wanted to put up a wall. And this wasn't the first time that a wall was discussed in America. It was discussed during the eugenic movement. They wanted to put up a wall to keep out all those they considered to be inferior. But remember, the wall was only at the southern border. It wasn't at the border of Canada. Because why? Because they considered the Mexicans to be inferior. So even when you start talking about the word marijuana, which is a racist term in itself, it came from the eugenics movement. Our drug laws came from the eugenics movement. Our immigration laws came from the eugenics movement. So I had one of my friends, Dr. Denisha Jones. Hey, Denisha, so I'm giving you a little shout out too. to ask President-elect, he wasn't president-elect this time, Joe Biden, about standardized testing. What was his response to standardized testing on MSNBC? And I think Sakia was in the room at this particular time.
Yeah, I was there in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I was in the room with him.
Right. And I quote, she was there. He said that he wanted to end standardized eugenics, standardized testing. He wanted to end standardized testing for all school children. Now, as president-elect, is he going to keep that promise? It doesn't look that way. It doesn't look that way. So, and you got to ask yourself, and the scholar Canady, I love his statement on standardized testing when he says it's the most white supremacist devised method to downgrade the African body. And that's exactly what standardized testing is. And when the Obama administration came out with Common Core, I can't tell you the people without melanin across the country went crazy once they found out that you were going to standardize test their children.
Yeah, they started a whole movement. White parents, I was in Ohio at that time, and they started, it was called PARC, the PARC test, P-A-A-R-C.
The PARC testing, which came out of the District of Columbia, yes.
It came out, exactly. And let me tell you, those white parents rose up across the state of Ohio, and Ohio had the PARC test literally 1 year, and they repealed it. They did replace it with something else, but it was not that particular test because there was such a huge uprising among white parents and families, in the suburbs and things like that. Like when you get ready to do our kids, like how you've been doing the urban kids all of these years, you're right. There was an uprising and they fought back, and at least in Ohio, they won.
Right. I mean, so you had thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in New York who opted out, and I was the political director of Opt Out, who all across the country who protested and actually got rid of the Secretary of Education and made the Obama administration. President Obama came out, I think it was in October of 2015, and apologized for standardized testing. And that was a major shift. I mean, because the Obama administration actually tried to trickle down on what the Bush and the Clinton administration had done previously in standardized testing. So here you have the imagery of the first president of color, and he wants to increase the amount of white supremacy school testing. I mean, it was completely insane. So we had thousands of African-American teachers, including the teachers in Atlanta, who got prison terms. I want you to hear this. The teachers in Atlanta got prison terms for cheating on white supremacy standardized tests. They got charged with racketeering. In the District of Columbia had a bigger scandal than the city of Atlanta. Now, anyone can look this up. The teachers in Washington, D.C. got bonuses that counted toward their retirement. So how is it that in Atlanta for cheating, the teachers went to jail? In Washington, D.C., the teachers got bonuses that counted toward their retirement. And they had an even bigger scandal than Atlanta did. So this whole understanding of how are we putting white supremacy in public policy, when you start studying eugenics, you're going to be going down a road where everything starts making sense. It's like a road, it's like a key to a roadmap. And you will start understanding relationships between different organizations, between different people. And, even when you start talking about vaccinations, which is so important, hey, baby, when we start talking about vaccinations, which are important right now during COVID, even when we start talking about the Tuskegee experiments, when most people don't understand, the Tuskegee experiments were started by the United States Public Health Service. They came from professors from the University of Virginia. The University of Virginia was the home of Southern eugenics. I want everyone to look this up. There's a professor named Dr. Preston Reynolds. She has YouTube videos. She has books where she's discussing Southern eugenics. There's Paul Lombardo, who formerly was trained at the University of Virginia. He's down at Georgia Southern. He has books on the subject of eugenics and the state of Virginia. And And, once you start looking up all of these things and you start seeing Lombardo's work, and you start seeing Dr. Whitman's work up at Yale University, and you start seeing the volume of the books and the study that has come out. And you start seeing the study.
You said Dr. Preston Reynolds is at UVA?
She's at the medical school at the University of Virginia.
Okay.
I had a friend who was working.
I just put a link in the chat for people to see who she is.
Right. I had a friend who, on her birthday, she went to a conference, and I had been studying eugenics for years. She went to a conference on her birthday at the at UVA on eugenics, and she came back and she talked to me for about 3 hours. She was just so riled up about how UVA had been linked. And this whole history had been linked to white supremacy eugenics. And she informed me at that time, I was not aware that the Tuskegee experiments came from doctors from the University of Virginia. It's an absolutely amazing history. So even when we start talking about vaccinations, you got to look up the connection between eugenics and vaccinations.
Oh, I'm already here. They like to call people anti-vaxxers and all of that stuff. They create little language to make people seem like they stupid or whatever. But if anybody has read Sister Harriet Washington's book, Medical Apartheid.
Yeah.
And I have recommended that book because it's also on audiobook right now for people. Yeah. That even if you can't sit and read, but if you're traveling, download it and listen to it while you're in the car on Bluetooth. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And people think it's just Tuskegee. That's why I recommend people to read that book.
Right.
It's not just Tuskegee. She documents the Tuskegee type of events all the way up until the 90s that we don't hear about. And she's got a book coming out now next month. In fact, I'll be interviewing her on this podcast, on this program here, hopefully next month when her book drop, talking about getting rid of consent. And speaking of consent, in Washington, D.C., they just passed a bill, and Muriel Bowser, the mayor, just signed it into law, where medical professionals can give children vaccinations without consent of the parents as young as 11 years old.
Well, in the District of Columbia, and that's where I reside for everyone else, we're on a whole nother level when it comes to understanding white supremacy. We have a long history of eugenics in the DC public schools. I think Dr. Sherman's research, In Search of Purity, brought that out. And every few years, you have to fight against these ideas. It's one of the ways that Brown versus Board was so successful. They discussed eugenics in Brown versus Board. So in every major Supreme Court decision that talked basically about race, 1967, Loving versus Virginia, 1927, Buck versus Bell, 1942, Oklahoma decision in 1942 around eugenics and how it was basically being used with white inmates in the state of Oklahoma. I think when you look at those Supreme Court decisions and you find out that all of them are laced with eugenic language and eugenic decisions, in the same day in Virginia in 1924 that they came out with what's called the Racial Integrity Act. They also included eugenics as part of it. So you had the 1924 Immigration Act that lasted until 1965. And I want you to hear this: from 1924, you had the Racial Integrity Act, which is basically built on eugenics, and it lasted till 1965. And what it did was to keep people coming out from Southern Europe, because the Europeans considered themselves to be the people from Southern Europe to be inferior. So when you want to know stories about why Jewish people couldn't get into the country, you have to go to the 1924 Immigration Act and understand that this blocked certain people based on eugenic ideologies. They had to take tests. You can go to the understanding the alpha beta test that were created in 1917 that basically determined how people in World War One, what they could do, how they could fight. And that's what created the SAT. So now you'll hear college coaches and they want to get rid of the SAT because of its origins in white supremacy eugenics. And I want everyone to look this information up, please. As Malcolm said, research for yourself. Don't take my word for it. And I want you to look up because
I'm dropping links in while you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually dropping links to things that you're referencing into the chat.
Yes.
So I just dropped a link to the 1924 Immigration Act, and it's from 1921 to 1936. Apparently, they passed a flurry of bills between 1921 and 1936 addressing immigration.
And and I want people to become critical thinkers. I know America doesn't want anyone to critically think. So there's a different understanding. And when you look at what the media, one of the things I had some of my college researchers to do was to just go on the internet and just for my hometown paper, which is the Washington Post, I just wanted them to take a look at how many articles the Washington Post had done on eugenics on different issues, whether it was from homophobia to immigration to climate change. And the Washington Post has done about 20 to 30 articles in the last 2 years on eugenics. They did one probably last week, articles where they just continuously print out different subject matter. So it's not a subject matter it's not a hidden secret. It's right in front of your face that if you don't know the meaning of the word, you'll think it's some scientific term that, maybe, that you just simply don't know. But what you don't understand is how is it playing out in your everyday life? And I think that is critical when we start talking about what happened on Capitol Hill. How is it that you had a complete security failure? That where you didn't have an adequate amount of officers, you didn't have an adequate amount of federal officers.
It wasn't a security failure. We know there was collusion at this point.
It was absolute collusion. But when you look at the fact that they were able to take over the United States Capitol, I mean, just imagine that we've spent billions and trillions of dollars in security. And there was no secret whatsoever that these people had come to Washington, D.C., and they meant business. But for whatever reason, on the local level and on the federal level, they failed to take adequate security measures and protect and make sure that the Capitol, and in Washington, D.C., what you have to understand, we have rallies and we have demonstrations of 100,000 people all the time. So this is not something, but why on this one particular day did everything break down that you had lawmakers hiding up under their desk with their staff for hours? They had to hide. They couldn't even get out of their offices. And these are our national lawmakers. So how secure does that make us if they can't secure the United States Capitol? And we spent trillions of dollars. And everybody knows that these have been Black folks. Completely different story. Completely different story. Look at the response to when Black Lives Matter was marching in Washington, D.C. and compared to what just recently happened. So when you start understanding these, this particular ideology and this particular pseudoscience, and understand.
I'm glad you said that. This is a good. I just want to because this is another trigger for me. People do need to understand that eugenics is absolutely a pseudoscience. And if you notice, what do we hear now? Trust the science, trust the science. I imagine they said that back then as well.
Yes,
Trust
they
the
did.
science, trust
That's
the science.
absolutely what they were
You
saying.
see what I'm saying? So they want
Mhm.
there's like predictive programming, right? Programming people to just trust. Don't ask any questions. Don't critically think, right? Forget about history. Yeah, we know we're still doing this, but just trust the science. And then they come up with names to call people to like ostracize people who are questioning. They call people anti-vaxxers. They call people COVIDiots or whatever. But African Americans, if anybody got a reason to question and say, hold up, I ain't listen, I'm not going with it. I need to research it. I need to know what's in it. I need to do my due diligence, if you will, like we do with everything else in our lives. We don't even invest in the stock market. It's not encouraged, I will say, to even invest in the stock market without doing your what? Due diligence. So why shouldn't we do our due diligence when it comes to our body and what we're putting in our body and understanding? You understand what I'm saying? So just trust
Yeah.
the
Oh,
science.
absolutely.
No, I got questions.
I have medical apartheid, and you have brought that up, and I hope you send a link to everyone on Harriet Washington's book and Harriet Washington's upcoming book about consent. After you read, and I would tell every American, every African American, and actually every American, you need to read medical apartheid before you decide to make any kind of decision when it comes to vaccinations. Um, and in a large part, this is going to be one of the most important decisions that you ever make in your life. And I just know from the things that I've researched, from the things that I've experienced, and from the things I continue to read, that there's very little chance possible that I would ever take a vaccination. I mean, and for some people that may turn you off, and for some people they may consider that to be selfish. But whatever kind of judgment you put around that, if you research the things that I have, and if you read the things that I have, the case for taking a vaccination is just completely off the table. And so, understanding once again the history of science in this country, going back and looking to being an early childhood educator and being able to explain this to children and have them to research and to look up and to understand in the world from a different perspective. I would just ask people. I remember when Dr. Frances Quest Welsing used to have seminars every week, at least, about every month. And she would just bring in hundreds of people in the Washington, D.C. area. Sometimes people came from different places in the country. And she would teach them and let them speak about different issues. And eugenics was one of the ones that used to come up on a regular basis. And it was an absolutely amazing experience from the standpoint of showing people just systematically how this was not a secret. It was just discussed openly, but it wasn't something that was being taught in universities. Not many universities. There are some states that do teach about eugenics. It wasn't something that was being taught in high schools. And essentially, after the Holocaust, the richest people, the richest families in the country that were supporting eugenics just wiped it out of the public imagination, just wiped it out of textbooks. But if you go back to textbooks before 1944, you're going to find out it was in 80-90% of the textbooks in this country. Go back and just read. I remember W.E. Du Bois.
Not only that, I want to just interject really quickly. One of the things that came to mind, particularly about science, is that Dr. Jacob A. Carruthers, one of our revered educators and now ancestors, wrote an essay in 1972, essay on science and oppression. And one of the quotes that I take from that, he says, "Science is not objective, nor is it neutral." And Black people need to remember that it is not objective. A lot of times people like to say, y'all always talking about culturally relevant curriculum and African centered this and African centered that. Science is objective. Math is objective. No, it isn't.
No, it
You know
isn't.
what I'm saying?
It's not objective at all. You have real human beings doing this, and you have human fallacy. and understanding that sometimes whoever provides the money, that's sometimes where the way the science is going to fall.
That's a
And
fact. That's a fact.
whoever's paying the bills, that's the way a lot of times that science is going to fall. And I don't want people to I don't want people just to say, "Oh, you're anti-science, you're anti-vaccinations. I'm not listening to this stuff." And then, I actually feel sort of comfortable with people who actually do take that approach, because those people who doubt, I know at times some of the stuff that I've read and some of the stuff that I've actually encountered in movies and film about eugenics, I just completely rejected, and I just couldn't. And then, when I was forced to just have to take a hard, deep dive, I mean, it was just amazing because, I'm not one of those people you could just tell anything and just not going to look it up and not research for myself. That's why I tell everybody, don't trust me. Look this stuff up for yourself. I really don't want you I want you to go and get on your computer and go to the library or whatever and pick up a book and find out what is in these books when they're talking about this one particular subject matter that affects every area of your life. I mean, and I was
About
talking
that.
earlier
How
about.
does it though? There was a question from Richard White. Richard White earlier put in the
Mhm,
comments. He wants to
mhm.
know, like, listen, how woven is eugenics into systems of American bureaucratic rule that runs those structures? How woven is it in everything that we do? So we
Well,
know it's in
well,
the medical field. We know it's in
well,
controlling
well,
women's reproductive.
it's in your economics, it's in your law, it's in your medicine, it's in your education, it's in every aspect. That all roads lead back to eugenics and American capitalism. Keynesian politics. I mean, Keynesian economics. We he was an officer in the British Eugenics Society. So when you start talking about where does this economic policies come from, he was a eugenicist, and I want anybody to look that up. I talk to people a lot of times, and they say, "Well, how do you know so much stuff about this?" I had years to do nothing but study this subject matter. And it was, and it was simply because the District of Columbia government decided to fire me illegally. One of the top teachers in the country, and it is undisputed without no evidence whatsoever. And what was I saying, or what did I do that was so threatening? I was questioning the authority of someone who had systematically fired Black teachers in Washington, D.C., that led to the systematic firing of teachers in Chicago, that led to the systematic firing of teachers in Houston, that led to the systematic firing of teachers in Oakland. All across the country, they were systematically firing Black educators. And this was occurring during the Obama administration. And let me just say that very clearly. The systematic firing of Black teachers was occurring during the Obama administration.
The
And
first Black president. That's
the first
arcane.
the first president of color. And it was being done based on standardized testing. And the union, and what did the unions do? I could put, my case file online for anybody to see. Matter of fact, I'm gonna put it in my book just just so that you can see what was going on in the District of Columbia. And remember who was supporting this? Oprah had Michelle Reed up on her show. Bill Cosby was on Michelle Reed's board. The broadcaster Martin, what's his name? Sakia Martin was on Michelle Reed's board. The one that got fired by CNN.
Um, a Black broadcaster.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Roland Martin.
Oh,
Roland Martin.
Roland Martin.
Yeah, Roland Martin was on Michelle Reed's board, and I had a chance to talk to him about it. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing spreading white supremacist ideology to black children? I mean, so when you think about, you know, who is funding some of the people in the black community, you know, how are they going about, you know, doing some of the things that they continuously do, especially in the Washington D.C. area? You know, where's that money coming from? White supremacy has a major economic tie to Washington.
Are you still there, Jeff? I think we might have lost you. I can't hear you. Dang, look like we lost you, Jeff. Come on, come, go out and come back in. Dang, was just getting good. He's frozen. I'm gonna see if I can okay, he coming out. He gonna come back in. So anyway, I'll take up some time, you know, until we can see if we can get our brother back. But everything is connected, is interconnected. As you all know, on this channel, I've been doing a reading. I've done two thus far, part 1 and part 2. I hope to get to part 3 this weekend. But I've been doing a reading on this book, The Choice, the issue of Black survival in America, and it's absolutely connected to what you hear Brother Jeff talking about tonight. And I can't wait till I get to the chapter where we're going to actually get into a little bit more about eugenics and how all that. Now, one of the things that I will say is that I don't know because I'm still reading the book, and it's been a very long time since I've actually read the book the first time. But one of the things that I will tell you is that he's going to talk about Planned Parenthood, forced sterilization. He's going to talk about all of that in the chapter. Looks like that chapter is probably going to be The Choice, called Part 3, or Genocide, starting on page 159. And looks like their other part says, oh yeah, Starvation and Birth Control, the Ultimate Weapons. That's in Part 2, Part B. I'll put that up there for you. I don't know if you all can see it. Can you kind of see it? The title of it. So right now we're on page 82. So we're getting to that second part there. And then you'll see part 3, The Choice, Genocide. So there's a lot. He's talking about the police state. He's talking about threats and tactics and all of these different things. So we're going to get to that. I'm going to try to see if Jeff can get back in here. I'm going to try to call him and see if he can come back in. Can you come back in? Okay, he calling me now. Hold on just a second, everybody. Hello, what happened? Thanks for your patience, everybody. He's coming back in. His internet went down. Y'all know how it is when you're doing these things. And so he's coming back in now. Oh, here. Okay, I got you.
Okay, all right. Sorry for that technical difficulties, but I think everybody understands the conditions in which we face right now.
Yeah, you're in DC. So, you're in that digital divide.
Yes. So I want people to understand how this is playing out in today's world. And when we start talking about the biotechnologies.
Yeah, remember my episode 5? You watched that I had.
Oh yeah, it was extremely powerful.
Talk about it. Yeah.
This sister, who I actually met, McDowell, a few years ago doing protests. She was a teacher also. And we came together to understand what was going on. What was the Obama administration doing in education. And so many teachers from across the country were fighting the Obama administration's education proposals that was actually working against children. And some of the teachers went a little farther, and they started doing a lot more research to make connections between some of these bigger economic plans that were open. I mean, these are things that are not secret, and making connections between the different foundations in this country. So right we're in now with big tech, with Google, Amazon, Telsa, other companies. It's called the second Gilded Age. And during the first Gilded Age is when they came up with eugenics. So now they're coming up with a new 21st century eugenics using basically biotechnology. And when you look at the different connections between the companies and how they're spending their money and where they're spending their money, it doesn't bode well for the average American. So these are not conspiracy theories. These are just simple matters of just doing a little bit of research to finding out the connections between different industries, where they're going, whether they're projections, and how does that fit for the average American family? Just a simple matter of driverless cars. Most people in the world don't realize that driving a car is how majority of people in the world make their money. Okay. Now, what happens to the world economy when you introduce a driverless car? Where do these people go to earn their bread and butter? Where do they go to earn a living? So when you start talking about introducing
they're framing it,
yeah,
it's coming, and they're framing it as automation, right?
as an automation, as an improvement.
I'm sorry, innovation, but it is automation and autonomous driving cars. And you mentioned Tesla, and there's Google has Waymo, and there's a bunch of them. It's amazing what's happening.
I'm looking. I want to answer a question that I see that's on the board from Wig Williams. I want to talk about, but I want to talk about transhumanism and its relationship to eugenics. Maybe we'll do that at a different time. But I see a question on the screen from Wig Williams, just a statement about they shut down 50 or so schools in Chicago about the same time. Not only did they shut down schools in Chicago, but they fired thousands of African-American teachers. Arnie Duncan, and you can find this online, and I hope Zakia links this. There's an article that links Arnie Duncan to racist firing of school teachers. Arnie Duncan was the Secretary of Education in Chicago. Widespread firing of Black teachers. And a lot of these teachers are still struggling to get their jobs and their careers back. And this was done by the Democrats, not by the Republicans. And so when you start looking at white supremacy just in a very narrow prism, that it's only the Republicans who are doing this, it's just these white supremacists, Trump supporters who you're going to be an absolute. It's the Democratic and the Republican Party. And it has always been the Democratic and the Republican Party. So you're talking about the party of big business and how does African Americans fit into the future of those. And I'm not just talking about the individuals who they're letting through the door to sheep herd everyone else and keep them quiet. So if me myself, I'm a political independent. I equally despise both parties. I think they're extremely unhealthy in their relationship to African American diaspora, and their relationship to helping resolve this white supremacy problem that we have, that they can no longer deny in our country. And so, you got to be able to, come up with an understanding of life that looks forward, not only for your children, but for your future generations. And what does that mean for African Americans? What does that mean for African Americans who especially scattered in this particular dysphoria. Um, and
What can people do though? Like, how can people, from your perspective, what can people do, particularly us, African Americans, Black folks, here in the United States? But be clear, this plan is global, right? Like we're entering into the fourth industrial revolution where, this is gonna increase and really cement further um, a global economy, if you will. We're seeing that happen right now, but what can people do with respect to trying their best not to get caught up in the transhumanism and all of those different things and becoming a cyborg? I'm looking at from when Allison was on the show, I have some of her slides and notes, and I was trying to see if I could actually pull it up for people to see. But I go ahead and if you want, try to answer that question. What's some of the things that you think people can do?
Well, one of the things I always stressed in is making sure that you have a 21st century education. Uh, what was being presented through standardized testing is a 20th century education. So if it was 100 years ago, standardized testing, would be appropriate to be doing with children, especially children of color. So we're entering into the era of big data, and data is what these companies want. Data is what these companies are selling. Uh, and when you start talking about the
Yeah, people on
fourth
Wall Street
industrial
say data is the
revolution,
people on Wall Street say data is the new oil, and we know what oil meant before.
right? Data is the new. So when you start talking about 21st, the fourth industrial revolution, and people actually being the commodities, as they were in slavery, that's a whole different shift of understanding of the world. And but what is it that people can do? You have to arm yourself with knowledge. You have to arm yourself with education. You can't look at the constant 24-hour cycle of propaganda that occurs on television and during the media. And you have to challenge people in their understanding of what it means to be human and what it means to be fully human. Um, and we just cannot decide that we're going to wipe out a significant part of mankind because some people have deemed them not to be as valuable or as important to society. And so we just simply cannot do that and survive as humankind. So we have some major challenges here.
I
We
pulled
are
up
as
the
people, about who
definition.
we are as humans.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
I
Trying
pulled
to,
up the definition
can
here
you
for
expand
everybody
it?
for the fourth industrial revolution. And the definition here says that the fourth industrial revolution is a mental model created by the leaders of the Joint Economic Forum and describes how physical, digital, and biologic technologies have collided and the resulting challenges and opportunity that it presents. So, this whole idea of becoming a cyborg and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Jeff.
what we need to do is, I think what would be helpful to people if we just came back another show and discuss that particular issue just specifically, just the fourth industrial revolution. What does that mean for Black folks? What does that mean for the African diaspora? What does that mean for individuals who who may not have melanin? Um, and where are we going as a people? Where are we going as a country? And and who is driving all of this? Who is making the money? One of the key things you can do in life is always follow the money. The following the money will tell you where policy is going or why policy is being created, more so than the propaganda that politicians speak. I think one of the reasons and one of the key reasons why they needed Donald Trump off of the world stage was because once in a while, just once in a while, he may tell the truth. And that truth embarrassed. That truth, that one truth that he told, embarrassed people all across the world.
Yep.
And what their plans were. And of all the lies that Donald Trump told, once in a while he would tell a truth. And they wanted him off of the world stage because they need someone who can manage, that has a particular image for American empire. And that's the thing you got to think about. We live in an empire, and we actually live in an empire that's being crumbled by its own white supremacist ideology. And that's what we saw on Capitol Hill. That's what we witnessed. And everybody in the world had a chance to witness that they could not secure its own nation's capital against their own racist ideology. And just
they could
imagine
secure
that.
it if they wanted to. It was collusion.
Well,
We know that now.
there you get. If they wanted to, I mean, imagine the nation's lawmakers up under desk, all the bravo and all the American exceptionalism and all the swagger that the American public, that Americans have been breathing for the last 200 years, and now here it is, they're up under desk for hours, shaking in their boots because their own white supremacist cousins and friends were walking around trying to talk about, let's hang the vice president. I mean, that was completely insane. They put up a gallows. I mean, you can go look at the, and I've talked, and I was actually on Capitol Hill. I was actually about to go to the credit union when this all occurred, and a black officer told me, he said, well, you don't want to go down that way. He said, they down there acting a fool. And I did not realize until I got home how big of a fool they were acting and, taking over the Capitol. But that's my piece. So I hope,
This has
people
been great,
have,
man.
I hope people have
you,
learned, and I hope people have followed, and I hope, you follow me on Facebook, and I'm about to spam my Twitter account. And so we can talk about this important subject some more. And I know it's a lot to take in. And I'm not asking anybody to just, tonight, just say, oh, what he said, everything. No, just take it in, because you're going to be hearing it again. And that was my process. That was the process that I went, like I said, I knew about it when I was 9. I studied it again when I was in undergrad. I had to face it again as a professional, but it wasn't until, my survival depended upon me learning about this particular subject matter that I truly embraced it. So I am where I am right now, and I look forward to discussing it more with you. And I just wanted to say to everybody, okay, thank you, Sakia, and thank you, audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we appreciate you, brother. This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I know that you have taken years to really study this. Like you said, I remember when I first moved here, you brought me down to the Georgetown Library and you showed me, all the things that you have been studying.
The Georgetown Law Library.
Law library, right.
Georgetown Law Library.
Right.
And I think when people understand that all of these books are in a law library, and once again, they have another separate library, the bioethics library up on Georgetown campus, that looks at a lot of these issues. Where are all these books, and how is it that the majority of Americans don't know about this particular subject matter?
Right. Well, I think we know, like a lot of things, it's intentional. And that's why on this program, on this channel, I try my best to bring information that you're not getting in mainstream media, that you're not getting, in popular culture. So I already know this is not going to be, like one of those channels that has a whole bunch of followers and viewers, because we're talking about serious things. And a lot of time, when you're talking about things that are serious, when you're talking about things that are important, that doesn't attract usually huge crowds.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
We're not talking about sports or the Kardashians.
Oh, we ain't talking about the Kardashians. We ain't talking about sport. We're talking about, trying to help Black people, evolve in our thinking, encourage critical thinking, bring them information again that they're not going to get on the mainstream stage, that they're not going to get in popular culture. And so, really to that end, we hope people share this video, please, to like-minded people, subscribe to the channel. That's what you're going to get here. If you're a serious person and you're interested in information, that you don't get on the mainstream, that you don't get in popular culture, then you want to subscribe to this channel. You want to share this video to people that you love so that they can have access to this information. We've dropped links. Jeff has recommended several books on this live, and you can go back and do it for yourself. You don't have to trust us. We encourage critical thinking on this channel. Don't trust us. Everything that he talked about, go do your own research.
Go do your own research.
Yeah. Like, you don't have to just believe us. Seriously, that's what it's all about. We give you a spoon, then you take it and run with it. So to that end, thank you, Brother Jeff. This has been great. We definitely got to have you back on.
All right.
And I want to encourage people, again, like the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video far and wide. We're trying to get this information out, particularly to our community, so that they know, what's happening in the world and some of the things that are currently, in the pipeline to happen. So we really appreciate you all. And thanks so much for watching today. You all have a wonderful evening and be blessed.
Be blessed. Yeah.